I'm not going to be talking anymore about your outline for your paper. So make sure that you're approved by the 31st. Uh, who am I? Oh yeah, this should help. Um, right. Maybe you want to take a picture of this. I wrote this, but it's somewhat clear. The Socratic method employed in a dialogue, the Socratic method usually entails asking someone, the interlocutor, could be some guy on the stand or some gal on the stand. Uh, what is X? Well, yeah, if Socrates is doing the questioning, the question is going to be, what is X? For example, what is justice? Examining the answer given, justice is such and such, right? Asking questions about the answer and discovering problems in the answer or problems that stem from the answer. When the interlocutor's answer is found to be problematic, it is rejected. Uh, After the answer is studied and rejected, the question, what is X, is asked again. Another answer is then given, or definition, by the interlocutor and then considered. This process is repeated numerous times. Usually the answers get better as the dialogue progresses, usually. Um, but if Socrates is doing the questioning, no answer is satisfactory. After many answers or definitions are given and rejected, the dialogue ends in aporia, puzzlement. The interlocutor is puzzled. He thought that he had knowledge, but it dawns on him that he does not. And Socrates himself is still puzzled, right? I'll put it up later too in the announcement section. So far, I've been putting everything up in the announcement section. Avec plaisir. So yeah, usually the dialogues end in aporia, puzzlement. Nothing is, on the face of it, nothing is achieved. No one learns anything, right? Now, if you read these dialogues between the lines, you do learn a lot, but you have to read between the lines. And again, these dialogues are preserved by Plato. However, Plato, the writer, also adds quite a bit, right, of his own ideas. We believe that essentially the dialogues were as Plato writes them. However, we also think that Plato embellished them. You know, he's also a writer and he's got his own ideas too, so maybe he wants to insert them in there too. So when you read Plato, you're always wondering, I wonder how much of this is historical and how much of it he added to it, right? Oh, and here's a bust of Socrates. There he is. The man whom the Athenians executed. Another reason why Plato and Aristotle are not fans of democracy is because the government that was in place at that time that had Socrates executed was a democracy. That would never happen, right, in a legitimate aristocracy where the ruler has a golden soul. Believed Plato and Aristotle. Uh, and here are busts of all three of them. There's Socrates to the left, Platon in the middle, and Aristoteles to the right. Once again, Socrates never wrote anything. Basically, what Socrates was doing, was asking questions, right? About general terms. What is justice? What is courage? What is piety or holiness? Now, notice that he's asking about virtues. Socrates is asking about virtues. We want to be people of justice. No, she's a just woman, right? Or a fair woman, right? That's a virtue. Courage, piety. And this is the way in which the Greeks did ethics. The Greeks did not ask what makes an action moral. That's what we do today. But the Greeks didn't do it this way. The Greeks did not ask what makes an action moral. The Greeks asked, what is this particular virtue all about? What is justice? So that I may know and become just. What is courage? So that I may know and act in accordance with it and become courageous. So this is how they did ethics. It's different from how we do things today. It's different. They're not concerned with actions. They're concerned with a person's character. They think that once your character is attuned, once your character has been molded correctly through the practice of the virtues, which required first and foremost an understanding of the virtues, then you would act morally automatically. In other words, what is justice? Such and such. Good. We got a good definition, suppose, right? What is temperance? So and so. Good. We got a good definition, suppose. What is courage? Good. We got a good definition. Now, let me act in accordance with these concepts. Let me practice. Eventually, I will no longer have to think about these things because through practice, I will automatically become virtuous, ethical, or moral. Just as a drummer doesn't need to think anymore about what to do when he or she plays the drums. Right? When I started to play the drums, I had to learn the hi-hat goes over here. You open it and close it with your left foot. The snare drum is the thing in here. The floor toms go over here. That's the crash cymbal. You have to think. But after much practice, the drummer doesn't think anymore. After much practice, the drummer doesn't have to think anymore. As a matter of fact, I think one of my best performances was one in which I was inebriated, do not tell the dean. It just comes automatically, like riding a bicycle. So that's how the Greeks approached ethics, right? You practice, okay, number one, you ask the question, what is justice? What is courage? What is temperance? Blah, blah. So you have intellectual grasp of what these things are. How do you know that you're right? Because your definition survives the Socratic attack. That's how you know that you're right. You gave the right definition. How do you know? Because Socrates was asking me questions, and at one point he stopped and said, "You know what? I'm convinced. I think you know what it is." Could that ever happen? They thought so. Is it difficult? Yeah. But worthwhile things are difficult. So first, you grasp the concept. You define it correctly. Then you practice it. And then you forget about it. Because you've practiced it so much, it's second nature. You will act morally. You won't need to ask what makes an action moral. Should I take this course of action or the other? Automatically, just as you breathe, just as a drummer plays the drums, you will act virtuously. Back to the Socratic method. There is one dialogue in which the interlocutor is not shown to be ignorant. It's not shown that he has knowledge either. But there is one dialogue in which the interlocutor, because of Socrates' questions, the interlocutor appears to be someone on the way to knowledge. That's the only exception. And that's when Socrates interrogates Meno. Meno was an aristocrat. When Socrates interrogates Meno's slave boy. When Socrates practices this so-called Socratic method on the slave boy at Meno's house and asks the slave boy mathematical questions, it appears that the slave boy has good answers to the mathematical questions. He doesn't have knowledge yet, but he's getting there. He's getting there. He's giving good answers. He's got correct beliefs. That's the only case. That's the only example of Socrates using the Socratic method on someone who is not clearly ignorant, right? But usually it's someone who believes that he has knowledge when in fact he does not. Right. Are there any questions, complaints, criticisms, invectives, insults? Okay. Let me know. So Socrates really knew how to make the establishment feel bad. He really knew how to make the establishment feel bad. He says, I've talked to all you guys in the establishment. You guys don't know jack shit. Doesn't say this, but he thinks it. And then I go to Meno's house and I talk to his slave boy, and he's closer to knowledge than you are. So he really knew how to get to them, how to annoy them. Okay, so let's go over one of these dialogues in depth. There's a dialogue called the Euthyphro, and we'll go over this today. The Euthyphro is a dialogue between Socrates and, you guessed it, Euthyphro. Sometimes, more often than not, the dialogues have the name of the interlocutor. So in this particular dialogue, Socrates is talking to a guy called Euthyphro. If you're going to go to law school, pay very, very close attention. If you're going to be a critical thinker, pay very, very close attention. And this is exactly what we should be doing in this course, because we're going to be critically thinking, and it's about an ethical issue. You'll see. Of course, the dialogue is written by Plato, but it's based on a dialogue that Socrates had with a guy called Euthyphro. But let's start at the beginning, right? Socrates is at home. He's watching TV or something. It's his day off from construction. And he gets a letter in the mail. This is true. They did have a mail system and all that. They didn't have electricity, but they had lawyers and mail, politicians, taxes. It was civilized. They just didn't have electricity. Anyways, he gets a letter in the mail. He's been summoned to go to court. He is charged with corrupting the youth and impiety. Impiety is another word for unholiness. You see, the establishment had to get him. The establishment had to get him. We got to get this guy. He's making fools out of us every day. What do we do? What can we charge him with? He's just asking questions, man, right? Yeah, but we don't like him. Think of something. And when the establishment wants to get you, it will get you. Okay? I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. When the establishment wants to get you, it will get you. So, one of the clever, no good members of the establishment says, well, wait a minute. Haven't you seen Plato and Adeimantus? Those little kids? Haven't you seen what they're doing? They're acting like Socrates. At home, they are asking their parents questions and they won't stop. Right? They're running around like mini Socrates, asking people questions. The children, the poor children, are possessed by the spirit of Socrates. Well, they've been corrupted by him. So we'll charge him with corrupting the youth. Right? What else you got? Well, he says he hears a voice. Some goddess is talking to him. Is it Apollo? No. Is it Zeus? No. Is it any of the gods and the approved, sanctioned Athenian pantheon? No, it's some goddess called Diotima. It's probably the devil. Charge him with impiety. And that's how they trumped up the charges against him. They're clever. Be careful. So Socrates gets this note. Crap, I've been charged with impiety and corrupting the youth because I got to go to court. The prosecutor's name is Meletus, Meletus. He's going to prosecute Socrates. Socrates goes down to the courthouse. Well, when he's outside the courthouse, on the steps of the courthouse, he runs into Euthyphro. Euthyphro is an expert in holy matters or piety. They meet outside the courthouse on the steps of the courthouse. They exchange pleasantries, right? Nice day, right? Yeah, beautiful. You can't beat the Athenian sun. Oh, hell no, man. But Socrates, why are you here? Well, Euthyphro, I've been charged with impiety and corrupting the youth. Man, I have a lot of explaining to do in that courthouse. Good luck with that. What about you, Euthyphro? What are you doing here at the courthouse? And Euthyphro tells Socrates that Euthyphro, has come to the courthouse to turn his father in for murder. Socrates, I come to turn my father in for murder. Socrates is taken aback. What? Murder? You come from a good family. What's going on? What happened? Well, I'm in a bit of a rush, Socrates. I have to go. You gotta tell me what happened. So Euthyphro tells him that back at the house, when Euthyphro wasn't there, he was out preaching or something. He wasn't home. One of the workers, we don't know if it was a worker, a slave, or a servant. It's difficult to translate. We'll say worker. One of the workers murdered another worker. So worker A murders worker B at Euthyphro's house, right? The murderer is also drunk, and he wants to continue to murder. But the other workers and Euthyphro's father and Euthyphro's father's friends, they take hold of this worker who is drunk, but very strong and very powerful. He appears to be on PCP or something. And they find it very difficult to restrain him, and he wants to continue to kill. So what do? They drag him out of the house. They drag him out of the house, and they tie him to a post. There he is. I went to art school, but they threw me out. Do you know why they threw me out? Do you know why they threw me out of art school? They told me you have no talent. That was back in 1987. You could tell people back then. You could tell a student you have no talent. Now you can't do that. So they said, you got no talent, get out of here. I said, okay. So then I said, oh, okay, I'll play the drums. And I don't want to repeat what the drum teacher told me back in 1988. You don't repeat that kind of language in good company, you see. But back then, when you weren't good at something, they would let you know. So, anyways, that's my masterpiece there on the board. They tie the murderer. They tie the murderer to the post. Euthyphro's father doesn't want to beat the guy, right? It could be a slave. Euthyphro's family for that time, right? For that time, they were good people. As a matter of fact, Euthyphro's father decides to go to downtown Athens to get a lawyer to figure out what to do legally, right? They're not in the business of beating anyone or taking the law into their own hands. It's wrong to have slaves, but for If they were, I don't know if they were slaves or servants or what, but for that's the way it was back then, right? And recently too. But they want to go by the book. They want to do the right thing. So, but they do have to tie him up because he's very powerful and he wants to continue to kill. They tie him up, and Euthyphro's father goes into downtown Athens, right? Looking for a lawyer. But he tarries. He takes a long time. And they didn't notice that this post was in a ravine. And it starts to rain, and this thing gets filled up with water, right? And now, this guy's dead. So now if he's dead, I gotta redraw it. Give me 1 second. There we go. The axis of the eyes. Il est mort. Oui. So, dead. Euthyphro comes home and sees this. Says, what the hell's going on here? I leave the house for 5 minutes and I come home to this? What happened here? Asks Euthyphro. And the other servants or workers or what have you, they tell Euthyphro, your father did this. Your father tied him up and he left him there. It started to rain and look at what happened, right? Well then, says Euthyphro, we are all equal under the law. And I am a man of virtue and holiness and piety and blah, blah, blah. And I'm not a fair weather moralist. I'm a moralist in the good times and in the bad times. If my father did this, I must turn him in for murder. Because we are all equal under the law. And that's what happened. And we do have to commend Euthyphro, right? He's very progressive. A lot of people today wouldn't even do this, right? We can imagine that in some households, not that all the wealthy are immoral, that's not true either, but we can imagine that in some households, right, a servant is killed or something and they sweep it under the rug. Right? It's just a servant. It's just a servant. Well, for Euthyphro, it's not just a servant. Right? He deserves justice, even if it's posthumous justice. So that's why Euthyphro tells Socrates that Euthyphro, is turning in his father for murder. And Socrates praises Euthyphro, and rightly so. Good going, you know. You really are a man of justice. You really do stick. You really do stick to your beliefs. You really do walk the walk, right? Even when the shit hits the fan. Because a lot of people are Christian on Sunday, but not on Wednesday, right? On Wednesday, there's something else. Not that these people were, this is before Christianity. There was no Christianity. Christianity didn't exist yet. So that's the story. So Euthyphro tells Socrates, so now you know the story, so now I gotta go. See you later. I gotta go turn my father in for murder. But Socrates says, hold on a second. Don't you understand that you must help me? You are obviously holy, Euthyphro. You are obviously pious, Euthyphro. You are obviously an expert in holy matters or piety, Euthyphro. And I have been charged with, where is this? Oh, come on. Okay. I have been charged with impiety says Socrates. You are the expert on piety. If you can tell me what piety is, I can go in there and face the prosecutor, says Socrates. And I can demonstrate to him that I am pious. I will have some knowledge of what it is if you can tell me what it is, and I'll be able to defend myself. So, Euthyphro, help a brother out. What is piety? And that's how he gets him. That's how he gets him. He appeals to his emotions, you know. What is piety? Again, piety is another word for holiness. And Euthyphro says, well, it is a pleasant day out here, right? I guess I could talk to you for a while before I turn my father in for murder. Perhaps I should help you. Okay, I'll tell you what piety is. So, Euthyphro says, this is very simple. Piety, Socrates, is what I am doing right now. Turning my father in for murder. That is what piety is. Now, my dear students, what is wrong with this definition of piety? Who can tell me what is wrong with this definition of piety? He's saying holiness is what I'm doing right now, turning my father in for murder. What's wrong with this? That's a good way of putting it, Malika. That's a good way of putting it. Isn't it's yeah. It's clearly not a definition. It's an example of piety. It's an example. Maybe it's too subjective in that it is based on his own experiences, right? Or experience. But it's definitely not. What was that? Isn't he not? Isn't he not? So how can he know if that is what he is doing? I didn't understand that, Laura. Yeah, you know, if you say that what is beauty, and I say what is beauty, a diamond ring. maybe a diamond ring is beautiful. And beautiful things can be examples of beauty in general. But the diamond ring is not beauty, it's beautiful, right? It's okay. What is beauty? Salma Hayek. Well, Salma Hayek is not beauty. When you ask about beauty, you're asking about something general, something that can be given more than once, right? There are beautiful cars, there are beautiful sunsets, there are beautiful women, there are beautiful this, there are beautiful that. There are beautiful paintings, but you shouldn't say that one of those things is beauty, right? Those are just examples of beauty. This is the problem with this attempt at a definition is that it appears to be a specific example of holiness, but it is definitely not a definition. A definition has to cover the different instances. A definition of something has to be universal. Who teaches us this? Aristotle, right? A definition has to be universal. What is love? Love is what I feel for my girlfriend. Suppose I say that. Yeah, but that's just too specific, because then if I die, love dies too, right? Because if love is what I feel for my girlfriend and then I die, then that feeling is gone. Well, that feeling was identified as being love, so there's no more love in the world. It's ridiculous, right? But this is how Euthyphro starts the dialogue, with giving this specific example of piety, claiming that it is the definition of piety. Of course, Socrates doesn't say that's false. Don't forget, Socrates only asks questions, right? So when Euthyphro says that piety is doing what he's doing right now, turning his father in for murder, Socrates might ask, well, what if your mother commits murder and you turn her in? Why would that not make you pious? Why is it your father? Because Euthyphro says specifically, holiness is turning in your father for murder, which means that if you turn your mother in for murder, you're not pious. But what's the difference? And suppose your father is not murdering anyone. Suppose you turn your father in because he's torturing people. That's not murder. They're still alive, and he wants to keep them alive to continue to torture them. Okay, suppose your father is torturing people for the fun of it, and you turn him in. That wouldn't make you pious. That wouldn't make you holy. Why not? Well, because Euthyphro says that piety is turning your father in for murder. But why would turning him in for murder make me pious, and turning him in for torture not make me pious? It's ridiculous. It's a specific example that just doesn't work. Let's take our last break. I'll see you at 2:10, and we'll see how this dialogue continues. I'll see you in 15 minutes. Be pious.